My name is Commissioner Frank Avila. I'm a commissioner at the Metropolitan Water Reclamation District of Greater Chicago. And as my guest today is Richard Lanyon. Richard Lanyon is a former executive director of the Metropolitan Water Reclamation District of Greater Chicago. Currently, he is an independent publisher, public work historian, and chairman of the Evanston Utility Commission. He also speaks frequently about water in the urban environment, and advises others to solve drainage and stormwater problems. And he is also the author and publisher of 3 books. The first book is Building the Canal to Save Chicago. Mm-hmm. The second book is Draining Chicago, the Early City and the North Area. And the third book, West by Southwest to Stickney, Draining the Central Area of Chicago and Exhausting Clout. That's a peculiar name there, Dick, on your third book. Dick, what caused you to write these 3 books?
Well, I think people take water for granted, and especially wastewater. Everybody in Chicago, 5 million people in the area, flush their toilet several times a day, drain their sink several times a day, without a thought of where that water goes and what becomes of it. So in a general way, to educate the public, I'm writing these books about the history of the Water Reclamation District, because it's really the district that has provided drainage for the city and also treats all the wastewater and manages all the stormwater to benefit the public.
Yes.
And I never found a history of the district, and here we have this huge public agency collecting taxes from everybody and performing these vital services without a definitive history. Yeah. And I just thought it was necessary to do that.
Yeah, and you're right. When we mentioned, it used to be called Metropolitan Sanitary District of Greater Chicago. Then they changed the name to Metropolitan Water Reclamation District.
Right.
Why? You were there when they changed the name, right, Dick?
Yes.
Why did they change the name?
Well, the word sanitation was kind of going out of style.
Yeah.
And the city of Chicago has a Department of Streets and Sanitation. And so there was, people would get confused whether you're talking about the city department or the Metropolitan agency. So I think the commissioners just thought it was time to update the name and come up with a better word than sanitation. So, and it's really more appropriate because we are reclaiming the water. The water was pure when it comes out of the tap, then it gets dirty when it goes down the drain, and so we are reclaiming that water and making it available for reuse.
Yes, you wrote 3 books, but you're planning a 4th book.
Yes.
What will be the topic?
Well, the 3 books. The first book covers why the district was started and the first big project in the 1890s, and then I decided to write the next 3 books talking about the 3 areas of the district: the north area, the central area, and the south area. So the 4th book will deal with the south area, also called the Calumet area.
The Calumet area. Now, was that the first plant, Calumet plant? Wasn't that the first plant?
Well, it was the first big plant that the district built, but actually it was not the first.
Oh, okay.
The first plant was a small plant in Morton Grove.
Interesting.
Yes, because the community was polluting the North Branch, and it was necessary to clean that up, and so the district in 1914 built this first small plant. And then there was another plant out in Broadview called the Des plant that was built at about the same time as the Calumet plant. And but the Calumet was the first of the big plants.
Of the big plants. Now, when you start the first book, and when did you start the first book?
Well, the first book, Building the Canal to Save Chicago.
Yeah, Building the Canal. And I think we have an image of that.
Yes,
right? Okay.
yes. And I started that in actually in the early 90s. The canal went into operation in the year 1900. And so in the year 2000, it was going to be a centennial
Yes.
of the operation of this canal. And I wanted to write a history about it, and I started doing that. Of course, I was working full-time, and I didn't finish it by the year 2000. And because of my other duties at the district, upon becoming a department head and
Yes.
the executive director, I just didn't have the time to finish it. But then when I retired, I pulled out my papers and finished the book.
Your cover, Building the Canal to Save Chicago, and you have 4 or 3 laborers on the cover.
Yes.
Here. What are they standing on?
Well, the two fellows leaning on the shovels are laborers.
Yes.
And they're, the fellow with his leg up on the machine is what we call an operating engineer
Yeah,
today. He was operating this machine, you see, and the machine is called a channeling machine. And this was a piece of machinery that was used in what we call the rock section of the canal.
Yeah.
It runs from Willow Springs to Lockport, 15 miles long, carved out of solid limestone. And a channeling machine was one of the machines that was used to define the wall, the vertical wall of the canal. It was a very important machine.
Oh, yeah.
Because then they used blasting
Yeah.
to remove most of the rock, and you didn't want those blasting shock waves to break up the wall.
Now, why is that an important topic, your first book, Dick?
Well, because the draining of the city was very important, and the sanitary and ship canal enabled the reversal of the flow of the river, which was the first important purpose. That kept pollution from flowing out into the lake from the Chicago River. The second purpose was that it provided a better outlet for drainage. Chicago's pretty flat and poorly drained, and so all of the drainage infrastructure is man-made, and it's all underground. But the river, or the canal system as I call it, is kept below the level of the lake. So it provides a lower outlet for drainage and reduces the incidence of flooding. And that drainage has helped the city ever since the year 1900 be a drier place.
Yes, there. Now, in your second book, you discuss drainage in the city before the sanitary district was created, right? And then your second book, and that book
Yes.
was called Draining Chicago. Easy
Right.
name.
Right.
Yeah, and on the picture of your book, you got the early city in the north area where you show the pumping station. Is that the one on Lawrence Avenue?
No, the top picture on the cover is the Wilmette pumping
Or the
station.
Wilmette pumping station.
Right.
And the Wilmette pumping station is still there.
It's still there.
Yeah,
It's
I
well
think
over
we
100
had to
years old.
remodel. I mean, we reconstructed it.
Rehabilitated.
Yes, a couple
Yeah.
years ago.
Right.
Yeah, we put 3 10-foot gates there.
Mm-hmm.
It used to be a 30-foot gate.
Yes, and we upgraded the pumps.
Yes.
We eliminated 2 of the 4 pumps, but the other 2 pumps, more modern machinery.
So in this second book, you discuss drainage in the city before the sanitary district was
Yes.
created. Did you attend it as a flashback? Or?
Well, sort of, because in the first book, I just talked about building the sanitary and ship canal to reverse the flow of the river. But there was a history of drainage before the district came along and before the big canal was built. And I thought it was important to describe that, because that was all background for the creation of the sanitary district. So yes, that part of the second book is sort of a flashback to explain how the city didn't have sewers until 1855,
Yeah.
56. And I talk about that and bringing Ellis Chesbrough from Boston to design a sewer system. And of course, then building the sewer system, all the wastewater went into the river, and then they had to do something about the polluted river, and that was the building of the big canal in the 1890s.
I see, and so the when it had a big rain, or when it used to go into the Lake Michigan, and the inlet was near the shore, and then it used to come in for drinking purposes.
Well, yes, and until they built the crib and the tunnel off of Chicago Avenue, and that opened up in 1867. Prior to that time, the water intake was right by the shore, and that's where all the polluted water was.
So the cribs, when a person goes out by North Avenue Beach, they'll see a crib out there, and that's how far out is that?
That's 2 miles.
2 miles
offshore.
And at that time, they built a tunnel.
Right. That was a revolutionary project in itself.
Yes, a tunnel going out. How many cribs are there now on Lake Michigan?
Oh, the city has about 6 or 7 cribs, and some of them are no longer used because the city has 2 huge water plants, and they each have 1 crib.
Yes.
So the other 4 or 5 are not being used, and the city can also take in water at the shore during the winter when they have ice out around the cribs.
Yeah, very. If anyone, I would recommend going out and buying all 3 books, just to learn how the city of Chicago is staying healthy, how the district is protecting the health and welfare of the residents of Cook County.
Yes, yes.
Yeah. Now, what is the north area?
Well, the north area. Basically, it's everything north of Fullerton Avenue up to the Cook County line, the Lake Cook County line, and from the lakefront west to either Harlem Avenue in the city or the Des Plaines River up in the suburbs. It's about 140 square miles.
Yeah.
And that all drains to one point, the O'Brien water reclamation plant on Howard Street in Skokie. So that plant went into service in 1928, and the second book tells the story of building the intercepting sewer network and the plant and pumping stations that serve that plant.
Now, when you mentioned that everything drains to that one point, explain to the public, the audience, what you meant by that.
Well, every municipality within that area has a local sewer system.
Yes.
Okay? Where does the local sewer system go? Well, originally they would go to the nearest waterway to drain to the river or whatever. Well, when the district came along and was going to build a plant, they needed to collect all that sewage, so they built this intercepting sewer network that serves all the municipalities, collects sewage from all the municipalities, and brings it to this plant on Howard Street.
So if a person lives in Skokie or Morton Grove, that is going to the north side plant.
Right.
Yes.
And even if you live up farther north in Northbrook or farther north down by the 606 trail, it all goes to that one point.
Yes, there.
People don't realize that.
No, they don't realize that.
Underneath our feet, under the streets, there's these huge pipes. They're like rivers.
Yeah.
You know, and
they travel too.
Right.
The human waste travels a long distance sometimes.
It does.
Yeah.
And stormwater too.
And stormwater, yes.
Right, because we have a combined sewer system in the city and in the older suburbs.
Yes.
So the combined sewer system handles sanitary sewage and stormwater.
Yeah. And the north side plant is located on Howard and McCormick.
That's correct.
If anyone's out there, they'll see the facility there.
Yes.
And that explains it in your in the north area in your second book.
Right.
Yes, that's your first book starts about the origin of the sanitary district.
Yes.
Yeah, and that was your first book. Then your third book has a long and unusual title. Yeah, I was looking at it. Did you intend it to sound like a Hitchcock motion picture? or maybe we should make a movie out of that third book.
Well, that's a good idea. Well, the West by Southwest does sound like the Hitchcock movie North by Northwest, but that's not the reason for that title. Yeah. It has a real meaning in the district's history because originally the district was building treatment plants to serve the different parts of the city, And so there was a west side, and they were going to build a west side plant to serve the west side. All right. They were going to build a southwest plant to serve the south part of the city.
Yeah.
Well, they couldn't buy the land on the south side of the canal, so they decided to build the southwest plant next to the west side plant. So we had two treatment plants side by side, built in the 30s, and up until the late 40s, they were two independent plants.
Yes.
So there was the west
Was-
plant and the southwest plant. And then it became the west-southwest plant. And then in the late 1980s, it was renamed the Stickney Water Reclamation Plant.
Interesting.
So that's west by southwest to Stickney.
So, but they still call it the West plant, don't they? Or I mean, though they call it.
Well, there's
Stickney?
still, yes, there still is a west side pumping station.
Yeah.
But the rest of the plant has been changed, and now it's all integrated as one huge plant.
Yes, and that's the largest plant in the world on the wastewater
It's the
side?
largest activated sludge sewage treatment
Yeah.
plant. Yes.
And the residents of Cook County should take a tour, since it's the largest in the world.
Oh, yes.
Yeah, take a tour on the facility there.
Yes, they have very good tours.
Yeah. Now you work for the district. How long have you worked for the district?
Well, up until the time I retired, I had worked almost 48 years.
48 years.
Right.
See, and I think when Dick Lanyon retired, we lost an expert.
Thank you, Frank.
No, an expert on what wastewater and how to treat wastewater. See, because that's a lot of knowledge that Dick took with him, and I hope you trained your people. And you did. You transfer all that knowledge to your people. Yeah.
Well, and I'm trying to impart a lot of that knowledge in my books, too,
Yeah.
because so many of the young people at the district today don't know about the history, and they wonder why are things the way they are,
Right,
you
right,
know?
yeah.
And so that's another reason why I'm writing these books.
Yeah. And now, you mentioned this exercising clout is a subtitle.
Well, now,
What is that about?
be
this
careful how you
clout?
pronounce that word.
Yeah.
It's not exercising, it's exorcising.
Exorcising, yes.
So you need an exorcist to get rid of clout.
Yeah.
Well, I tell that story because,
Yeah. Well,
It's-
first of all, what does clout mean?
well, clout, I mean, almost everyone in Chicago knows what clout is. That's a person of influence who tries to, influence a decision that's being made, or to sponsor a person for employment and so forth.
And that's clout here in the Chicagoland area.
Yes, yes, it's
That's why it's an interesting name
been
on your
a part of our
Yeah.
political history for a long, long, long time.
maybe it'd be a good title of a movie.
Well, the district was run by, well, first of all, what are now called commissioners were
Yeah.
originally called trustees. And it was run by the trustees. There was nothing in the statute that talked about management of the organization. So after you had built a lot of plants, you needed to hire a lot of people to operate the plants. And of course, that opened the door to patronage and other mischievous events. And the district had seen a number of scandals over the years. And then in the early 1960s, the Chicago Tribune and other newspapers began to write a lot of articles about the district. And the Better Government Association started to do investigations, and some of the radio stations got involved. And so there was a lot of publicity about all the evil things that were going on at the district. Ghost payrollers, people who didn't come to work but collected a check, and thievery and loafing and sleeping on the job, drinking on the job, etc. Well, this all came to a head, and the trustees were prevailed upon by the media and the good government people to bring in an outsider, a reformer.
Yeah.
And a man was brought in from the state of Washington by the name of Vinton W. Bacon.
Yeah.
He reported for duty in October of 1962. I happened to start in February of 1963, so I was part of this new reform at the district. That was a very exciting period in my life.
Yeah.
Um,
And I started, I think, in June of '62.
You started just
I think
before I
something-
did.
yeah.
Yes. And so it was Mr. Bacon's period at the district lasted a little over 7 years. It was very tumultuous, but a lot of reforms were brought
Yeah.
in. And most important was the state statute was revised to explicitly define the roles of the commissioners or the trustees at the time, and the role of the what was called the general superintendent, later called the executive director. That definition has stood the test of time,
Yeah.
and is why the district is such a well-run organization. It didn't put the trustees or the commissioners in the back seat. More importantly, their role is to assure that the district is responsibly governed, and also to make the district open to the public.
Yeah.
So it was an important change in the district's history.
Yeah, a lot of things were going on in '62. I mean, going way back, I remember my first job at the district was tunnel. I was doing a lot of tunnel work there because the subdivisions were, a lot of subdivisions were being built, and they had to bring out the interceptors out to service those subdivisions because of the
Yes.
municipality, local sewers were coming in.
Yes.
Yeah, and so that is your third book. Has a long and unusual title. There, see, and it's
This is the third book.
yeah, West by Southwest to Stickney. That's your third book, and we have an image of it. And you know, before the show, I mentioned, is that a boy or a girl, and what is that person doing? And you said, well, it couldn't be a woman because the person there is eliminating himself out there, and out there in what year was that? You said
Well, yes, that was a 1904 photograph.
1904.
And you know, I would like to explain that one of the important parts of these books is I used a lot of photographs from the archives
yes.
of the Water Reclamation District, and they began to take photographs of their work in 1894. So there's this wealth of photo documentation. And this particular picture, in 1904, was taken by a photographer who was taking pictures along the West Fork. Now, the West Fork doesn't exist anymore. It was filled in the 1930s. But he happened to catch this person standing on the riverbank, and the person was urinating in the river. Well, in 1904, everybody was doing that because all the sewers were flowing into the river. So, you know, that's the way the people thought of the river.
Now, in your third book, you mentioned Bubbly Creek. Is not the real Bubbly Creek? Where is the real Bubbly Creek?
That's correct.
Because we all call it Bubbly Creek. I go out there to that fork, and there's Bubbly Creek.
Well, right. The Bubbly Creek today is only a little over a mile long. It runs from 38th Street near Racine Avenue North up to Ashland and about 2700 South. But it had two arms, the east arm and the west arm. And the west arm followed south of 39th Street out past Western Avenue. And when that south side started to develop, they built sewers to discharge into this west arm. And the west arm was kind of a tiny creek, and it just became overloaded with sewage. And it bubbled a lot because it didn't flow anywhere. And that's why it got the name then, Bubbly Creek. And it was so bad, well, they eventually built an intercepting sewer to capture the sewage flowing in, and then they filled it in because it was beyond saving, you know. So, and it was eventually filled in all the way over to Iron Street, east of Ashland Avenue.
Now, the stockyards were located around there also.
Oh, yes.
Yes.
So not only does sewage flow into there, but a lot of stockyard waste.
Yeah.
Now, most of the stockyard waste flowed into the east arm.
Okay.
And that didn't bubble so much because there was a steady flow in there.
Yeah, okay.
And the sediment on the bottom didn't have a chance to ferment so much, it flowed out.
Yeah, I see. It'd be interesting. Your book then is similar to Sinclair's book. Sinclair, remember Sinclair wrote the book, what was the name, The Jungle?
Oh, Sinclair, yeah, Upton Sinclair.
Yeah, Upton, yeah.
The Asphalt Jungle.
Yeah, The Jungle, about the...
Am I getting that right? I
yeah,
don't know. About the stockyards.
Yeah, about the stockyards there.
Right.
And so your book is equivalent to that too.
Yes.
So, but Bubbly Creek and there's a stretch there where our pumping station, Racine Pumping Station is right there.
Yes.
Bubbly Creek there. Yeah.
Right, that's the only flow in Bubbly Creek today.
Yes,
when that pump station pumps, and it doesn't pump that often.
No, and I know they've been trying to clean that up, and so far it hasn't been cleaned up yet because the Army Corps was going to clean it up, and they were going to clean up the waterway, but then they found toxic chemicals on the land side, on the shore. So the Army Corps said we're the water. so the U.S. EPA is in charge of the soil. So that's why it hasn't been nothing has been done yet.
Well, and going forward with Deep Tunnel and the McCook Reservoir now online, we'll see less pumping at the Racine Avenue pumping station into the river.
Yes, yes.
So that'll help the river.
Yes, and then you explained the history of the Deep Tunnel and your involvement. And is it now working or as intended, or what has to be more done with the Deep Tunnel?
Yes, it is working as intended. It's it's been coming online gradually since 1985 when the first set of tunnels went into operation, and just in the last few years we put two big reservoirs online, the Thornton Reservoir out south and the McCook Reservoir out southwest. That was the last one online, just starting the first of this year. And already we've seen fewer incidents of combined sewer overflows going into the waterways in the county. Yeah, and so it's working. Yes.
Yes, we got the McCook and the Thornton Reservoir, and it's like the city of Chicago. They have a lot of pavement here. All the wetlands has been gone. I mean, I thought we have many wetlands, maybe a small amount of wetlands here, but everything is all built up pavement. So when it rains, it's that pavement that goes into a control system.
That's right. That's right. So we're replacing the storage that was once here with all the floodplains and the wetlands. Plus, additional storage is required for all of the impervious surfaces that we've created. And development continues to go on. I mean, people tear down small houses and they build big houses. You make the streets wider, you make the parking lots bigger for more customers, and so you're always battling this development, which is bringing on more impervious surfaces. So that's why we're doing so much green infrastructure these days, is to mitigate some of that increase in impervious area.
You know, you have excellent books, and I would recommend if they want to know the history of how Chicago is staying healthy, is reading your book. You got your book one is what now? Let's go through your books again.
Building the Canal to Save
Chicago.
Right.
Excellent book. Your second book is
Draining Chicago. The early city and the north area.
And your third book is West by Southwest Stickney. I would recommend everyone to go out and buy all three books and maybe make a movie and go more deeper into your third book.
All right.